All right, guys, I'm here with Jude Swisher. How are we doing today, Jude?
Hey, I am doing fantastic. How are you, Adam?
I'm pretty good myself. So for those that don't know, Jude is the co-founder of HMA Wrestling, which does a lot of different types of wrestling media, like a podcast, video podcasts, articles, a lot of different stuff. And Jude is also a wrestler, gonna be a just finishing up his sophomore year in Pennsylvania, right?
Mhm.
Just came off a nice fourth place finish at state. So yeah. Jude, if you want to just start, how did you get into wrestling
All
originally?
right. So it's kind of a funny story. So my dad wrestled in college. Wrestled for Messiah University, which I believe was D3 at the time. And
Nice.
and I and he was never very good. Um, but he knew like that wrestling instills these special, values into a person, right? It can help in your character development. And so he knew that he
Mm-hmm.
wanted his sons to wrestle. So when I was probably 6 years old, I went to my dad took me, like pretty much forced me. He's like, Jude, you're going to wrestling practice, even if I didn't want to. But he said, Jude, you're going to wrestling practice in downtown State College at the youth program. And that first night they had a special guest coach, and it was Ken Chertow. For
Okay.
those who don't know, Ken Chertow was an Olympian, I believe in the 80s or 90s, but he had a huge camp system that he still runs today. Very tough guy, good wrestler, couple-time NCAA All-American. But the thing about Ken is that he is really intense. He's a short little guy, but he is like loud and angry. And I remember going into there, and there's maybe like 60 or 70 kids crammed into this gym, and um, and so there's already a lot going on, and my little 6-year-old brain couldn't handle it. And then when Coach Ken started like yelling at us and having us do like all this sorts of technique and stuff, I just started bawling. And so I cried the whole first practice. Not only that whole first practice, but the whole next one, the one after that. I would cry in the car, during practice, on the way home, while I'm thinking about it. Like anytime wrestling came up, I would just be so scared and nervous, um, and it was just a rough experience for me, even from the beginning. And so as a result, like the first maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of my time competing in wrestling was just, I hated it. I like, it's kind of funny now that I do my podcast on wrestling and how much I love wrestling, but like it's funny that I started out not liking it even a little bit. Um, and yeah, no, I just didn't like it because of um, like my dad would have, not in like a negative or an abusive way or anything like that, but he had a high standard for me, right? And he expected me to put in my best effort into it. Um, and as a kid, where I've never done anything hard in my life, right? All I want to do is go play video games and relax and whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Having someone set that standard for me was really, it's just challenging. So it definitely took me a long time to come to terms with my relationship with my dad, on top of how I um, can wrestle on the mat, and how I can and deal with it. So I don't know. Does
Was
that
it?
answer your question?
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right.
Was it just like the intensity of the guy that made you cry at those first couple practices, or
Yeah,
what?
it was that. I mean, it was also like, no, I would say that. I would say it kind of scared me at first. Um, Also, I'd never played a sport before, and
Oh.
because I was only in kindergarten, I'm pretty sure. So it was my first experience being around a lot of noisy kids, and like, I wasn't very strong or anything. Like I wasn't good at wrestling. I have no natural ability, and so I think I got beat up that whole first year. Um, it was just a not fun experience for me. But no, I think the initial reaction of just being scared of this man yelling, and it just kind of shocked me. So I don't know.
What was it? Okay, so I started wrestling in eighth grade, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't really relate to a lot of the like youth stories that a lot of people have.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what do you think you got out of wrestling from like kindergarten to seventh grade?
Hmm. So, so looking back upon that time, what I really took from it was it was more than anything a character builder almost, but it really helped to develop my relationship with my dad, and me and my dad are super duper close. Um, and we would go, especially when I was 10. I remember the season when I was 10 years old. We Every single weekend we'd go to a tournament, and so I'm spending a lot of time with my dad. And I'd take lumps for sure, but I'd come across success. And so definitely the youth years was just opening my eyes to wrestling and the value of hard work, and what I can learn from the sport. And so, yeah, no, that's kind of how I look back upon those years. Like good times, to be sure. Like it was definitely a lot of fun, but mostly I was nervous about my matches, and um, I was scared of losing. Just normal kid stuff. I think I definitely cried anytime I lost in practice. In practice, even.
Practice.
Yeah, I would cry during practice, just because it's embarrassing to lose, right? You're out there, and it's not only that you're losing, but it's also like my dad had this standard, and I was like, maybe I'm not living up to it. Maybe I'm not good enough. I don't want to do this. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff going through my head. But that's kind of my youth wrestling experience for the most part.
So then, going off of that, like, when did your mentality towards the sport change?
So it goes back to the summer before my 8th grade year. Ken Chertow, who I trained at ironically, I actually went to his like home training center where he had these mats in his basement, and kids would come all over Center County, Pennsylvania, to wrestle. And it was one of the main clubs in the area. And he moved to somewhere down south. I want to say either West Virginia or Florida. And so when he was gone, there was just a need for a club, right? There was nowhere to really train aside from, a couple. Like you go to Bucknell, which was about an hour and a half away from my house, and you could go to 4M, which was another 45 minutes, and that was just long. It's a long day to sit in a car the whole time. So David Taylor, Penn State legend and all that, he started a club about 20 minutes from my house in Julian, Pennsylvania, and to kind of fill the space. And I remember I was not even gonna go to it. I wasn't gonna go to the club, and I don't remember the reason. I think it was expensive, and I went one time because the first practice was free, and I remember coming back and telling my dad, like, this is where we need to go if I want to get better. And I didn't like it. I didn't like giving up my Sunday afternoons to go and wrestle in a club with David Taylor, and he's gonna have a whole new standard for me. But like the fun thing about that whole situation was it was full of kids that I knew, right? It wasn't something new. So all the Center County kids, from youth all the way up to high school, were coming to DT's club, and so that was a cool experience. And it was really that it was M2. I'm wearing an M2 shirt right now, but the first. The
nice
first,
sweatshirt.
yeah, I know. I think it's Scrap Life. They make good stuff.
Oh yeah.
But no, it was the first 3 or so months of being in the club with DT and wrestling a lot of good wrestlers and performing pretty well. Really changed my mentality, and just being around the coaching staff there helped me look at wrestling not at a negative way, but at a positive way, and look for the opportunities that can be made through the sport. And the biggest thing to me, one of the few tournaments that I remember, competitions that I remember from my youth career, was the Lock Haven. It was they have a folk style open tournament. And I remember going into that tournament and not being, oh no, I was nervous. I still had like that negative like energy and whatever. And I ended up losing in the finals, and that was the first time I didn't cry when I lose. What? That was the first time I didn't cry.
Yeah.
And I remember walking off the mat, like being like, okay, I still got work to do. And that was a big thing for me because I'd always cried when I lost. So definitely a different experience. And I owe it all to M2, and they developed my mentality of, it's a process. You've got to make mistakes, but let's keep moving and keep growing from it. And from there, definitely 8th grade, it just, I just started to give myself fully to the sport and really recognize how incredible it is and how fun it is and all the good things that can come of working hard. So I would say that is the point of the biggest transition for me.
So you're 16 now, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And then you started going there in 8th grade?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see any like success before that, or is that kind of the game changer?
Yeah. So I placed twice at the PJW state tournament. Once when I was 10 and once when I was 12, which is pretty good. There's, the youth circuit, especially in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of crazy parents. There's a lot of crazy kids.
I can imagine.
It's some of it's pretty absurd. And I remember I went to a youth tournament this wrestling season to just coach my little brother a little bit. And I was like, whoa, it's wild. It's wild stuff. So I had a little success. I think I qualified for states like every year in youth since I was 9. And I was pretty good. So nothing like youth state champ level, but like a consistent guy, I suppose.
Okay, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like just as a regular wrestling fan, if I saw David Taylor on the street, like I don't like to like annoy famous people because I feel like enough people do it already, but I would definitely ask for like a picture and an autograph. But you
Right.
could sign whatever clothing item I have on. He's a pretty cool guy. So like, what is it like having him as your coach and like knowing him on more of a personal level?
Ah, wow. So it's a little surreal, but what it comes down to is just remembering like he's a human too, right?
Mm.
Yeah, we're all humans. We all have our own unique personalities. We all get along or don't get along, and
Uh, is he a human though?
I know it's crazy, but he really is.
Okay.
He's man, my relationship with Coach David is something really special. I've always even from a little kid, because I would go to the Penn State Rec Hall matches, and I've always just been a big DT fan. I think I might have cried when he lost his junior year to Kyle Dake, or when he lost to Kyle Dake. And so just to have him as my coach was like, whoa, and this was before he even really did anything huge on the senior level, right? He made the trials, finals, and stuff like that, but he never was the Team USA representative. He didn't have a world medal or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, David has been really incredible to me and my family over the past years. Really nice guy. One of the biggest things is, and it's hard to tell when you just see a guy talking on the TV of like what his true character's like, but it's clear when he interacts with the club and talks to us and teaches us that he really genuinely cares about us, and gives a whole lot to us. And something I noticed right off the bat was, this is as important to him as his own training. So just to have him as a coach is, it's surreal. And I recognize how grateful I am and what a position I'm placed in, where I can have high level coaching at such a young age. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and you can tell like he really values relationships and all that kind of stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's training to become a world champ again. He runs a training center for wrestling. He does
Yeah.
all the scrap life stuff and like knows someone like you on the personal level.
It
Like that's pretty cool.
is
Like
pretty
you're
cool.
awesome, but I mean there's probably so many people that he knows on a personal level, which like
Yeah.
You gotta respect someone who's that
No,
busy. So.
everyone at the club, we love Coach David a lot. It's he said this on the first day was, he's like, look around, you guys are going to not just be training partners, but you're going to be brothers, and you're going to be my little brothers, right? Because the way M2 is viewed is we're a family almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guys who are consistent, the guys who are always there, we're always in there grinding in the room together, and making gains. And it just bonds you in a way that nothing else can. And, I remember when he said that, looking around at the kids, which I knew, but was never like friends or anything with them. I remember looking around and being like, what, these guys? Am I really going to be friends with these guys? And, I mean, it's more than that. It's more than just friendship. So us at M2 are a very tight group, and we owe it to Coach David, but also Coach Mark McKnight and Coach Eric Thompson, both of which do so much to hold the club together, and make us bond. It's a fun time. Another interesting thing about M2 as a club is we have a lot of fun off the mat as well. So we had one of the fundraisers we did was a cornhole tournament. Like we got together, we rented I believe a pavilion, got a bunch of food, and then just had a cornhole tournament. It was awesome. I actually own an Instagram meme page that just for the M2 guys. It's called the M2 Meme Center.
Oh, okay.
And we just make little memes about M2, and they're all inside jokes, but it's all fun stuff. And, it really helps us grow together off the mat as well. So.
Yeah. Isn't it cool, like, how much wrestling bonds you with the people you're around just from, like, going through all the crap together?
Right. It's a sport that develops relationships in a way that no other sport can. Like, especially because you look at wrestling, especially like from an outsider's perspective, you're only seeing it on the TV. Like, you don't know these guys, you don't know their personalities, you don't know how they relate to each other in the room or off the mat, or you don't know if a guy's a friends or foes or whatever.
That's true.
But when you're a wrestler, nothing bonds you like just going through all the crap. Like you said, it's tough.
Hard practices.
It's hard.
Really hard practices.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And then you finished up your freshman year, you qualified, and then this year you took fourth. So
yeah, I mean,
bright future ahead.
To be continued. And I'll say it right now on the podcast. My goal is to be a 2-time state champion in Pennsylvania next year and the year after that. And I'm going to be completely honest. I thought I was going to be a state champ this year. I really did. State tournament, it didn't go as well as I had hoped. I mean, clearly I took fourth. But like looking back, I didn't wrestle necessarily bad. The kids I lost to, I think, were better wrestlers than me. So I don't look at it as being like, oh, I got screwed, or oh, I wrestled bad, or blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, no, that's where I deserve to be. But it's time to work now and get to the top of the podium next year. So that's basically it. That's my high school career. And it's funny that to talk about it because not a ton has actually happened. But hopefully sometime soon. Yes. I mean, I turned 16 in March. So that was my last birthday.
Nice. I'm just curious, like, how like hyped up is the Pennsylvania State Tournament? It's got to be pretty cool to watch.
It's like nothing I've ever experienced. It's also different at every level, at every age group. So I've qualified for the state tournament at every age level. And the youth one is absurd. The youth tournament is like, it's so crazy. It's so insane because it's all like the wrestling fans, but then combined with like the crazy parents, like want your kid to succeed thing. And then you combine it with like 400 or 500 kids running around. Oh my gosh. It's like nothing else. I want to go back to that again someday. It's a really fun time, but the PA high school state tournament it's got to just be the highlight of any wrestler's season. That you got college coaches, you got Flow Wrestling, you got PA Power. Everyone's there to watch these young stars go up, because the kids who make it big in PA wrestling, chances are they can make it big in college wrestling too, because, I wholeheartedly believe that Pennsylvania wrestling is the toughest in the whole country. Say what you want, New Jersey, say what you want, California. But if you're winning Pennsylvania states, you have a really good case to be, one of the top wrestlers in the entire state, United States of America. And because of that, it's just a fun, exciting time. There's a lot of pride that comes with a state title and a state medal, and even to be a qualifier. I know that in some towns in PA, like if you qualify for states, like they'll put you on a fire truck and they'll drive you around the town, and like, because it's a big deal. You got to be a real good wrestler to even make states in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So fun times for sure.
I was just going to say, I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm unbiased, but I'd probably agree Pennsylvania is at least one of the toughest states.
Yeah.
There's a lot of D1 guys that have a lot of success.
That's for sure.
Okay, so my parents live in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
How far is the state tournament from Philly if I wanted to check it out next year?
So, I'm not entirely sure. Harrisburg to Philly, I'd say it's under 2 hours. Pennsylvania is not a huge state. Not Harrisburg, it's Hershey.
Okay.
And I'm live in State College, and so everything is 3 hours from State College, just about. So that's kind of how I see it. It's probably not super big.
Nice. So right. we can get into.
Sorry, that was my little brother.
Oh, no
yes. Worries. All right, Jeremiah, you got to get out of here, my man. Bye-bye. Yeah. All right, he's gone.
No worries. So as I mentioned, Jude is also the co-founder of HMA Wrestling. They run a pretty decent-sized podcast, different articles and videos and that kind of stuff. He runs it with Sam Herring. He's the co-founder. But yeah, how did you guys even meet?
Wow. Okay, so as the story goes, I joined Twitter in September of 2019 just to ask questions for Flow Wrestling Radio Live, because they do their like FRL questions, Q's from F's, whatever.
What was your Twitter handle name?
Oh, it was at FRL Questioner, and my name since it was a prank Twitter, it was Mike Uzin, spelled MIKE UHIZN. And because I would want them to be like, my cousin asks, and they'd be like, what, your cousin? And like, I was like thinking like, man, how funny would that be? Yeah. But then, and as that went on, I just had fun with Twitter. Didn't have much of a following at all. But I noticed there was this kid on Twitter who would tweet all the time during the day, like all the time, retweeting, quote tweeting, everything. And I was like, and I knew he was a kid because his Twitter handle was Samwise_2006. And I was like, this guy's a kid. And I think he's homeschooled. So I was homeschooled, still am. But since 7th grade, I've been homeschooled, and I just slid into his DMs, like pure and simple. I just crashed in there, and I was like, yo man, my name's Jude Swisher. I'm a homeschooler. Are you homeschooled? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, dope. And then we just started talking. And so Sam and I
love it.
Dude, and Sam and I were just like two peas in a pod. We hit it off right away. We have a lot in common, everything from, our wrestling to our faith, to our big families. I come from a family of 6. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Sam is the second youngest of 7, if I remember correctly. He lives in Tennessee. I live in State College, so we are far away. And I started talking to him before the whole Southern Scuffle thing went down. So for those who remember correctly, this Southern Scuffle and then last year's Southern Scuffle, there was a kid on the mic. You know, he was commentating matches, and everyone's like, who the heck is this guy? And turns out Sam Herring, the same kid that I've been talking to for a month now. And he's like, Jude, I'm going to the Southern Scuffle to meet the Flow guys, and they are going to let me commentate matches. And so at the time I was like, whoa, that's awesome. And I went and listened to him, and I was like, he's fantastic. You know, Sam Herring has so much talent behind a microphone and in person. He just really knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's when he started to gain some notoriety in the wrestling community. And I kind of rode his coattails for a little bit. Like I would slowly build my own following. And then we were talking about the NCAA tournament and like the upcoming, I was going to go. And I was like, Sam, you want to have a podcast and we can just talk about this? He's like, okay. And it was funny because it was mostly a joke. I mostly was like, bro, what if we had a podcast? And he was like, haha. And then 2 weeks later, he just sent me this link to this thing called Anchor, which if you're not familiar with, is super, super helpful for starting and creating and distributing podcasts. And so we just kind of jumped right into that. And man, it really took off from there. That was a wild time.
I should cut that clip right there and just make it my Anchor ad.
Dude, maybe we should do some Anchor ads on Home Advantage. That might be something to consider.
I think if you got a pretty big following, it probably pays off.
Probably. I don't know how much. The funny thing about Home Advantage is that we don't do it for the numbers. So we have a sponsor. His name's Tony Rotundo. WrestlersWarriors.com. He takes some excellent photos. But we don't get paid. Neither Sam nor I do. We decided pretty early on, like, that's not the direction we want to go with the podcast, simply because money's hard to manage. And if we're getting like a steady income, now we have to start paying taxes and start messing around with that kind of stuff, which is definitely really difficult, especially for two kids. But so Tony, while we call him our sponsor, he really assumes the role of a mentor for the podcast. Just such a humble and selfless guy, right? He sent us an email about week 4 of the podcast and was like, guys, you guys are doing some really good stuff, and I want to help you be even better. Like, just to be able to reach out to kids like that and say, like, how can I help you achieve your goals? It's just something else. Really, really selfless guy. And because of that, he's helped us in so many different ways. But like we decided pretty early on that it's too hard to manage money, especially at our age, and making money is it's not what we want to have our motivation be, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about wrestling because we love it. We love the sport. And so that's really our motivation. And so even that, like, we don't even look at the analytics or the numbers for the podcast, just because we're not really worried about it or not. So I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, not just like taking money out of the picture, even if it's subconscious, it just, like, it makes it a lot more fun because you're doing it for the original reasons you started it,
Right.
So
right.
It's awesome.
And we, Sam and I said we're kindred spirits, right? But we're on the same page about a lot of things. And because of that, we're able to, take the podcast in the direction we want while having the same ideas. We have the exact same vision. And that's what we pride ourselves on, because when we cut out variables like money or stuff like that, it just makes our lives so much easier and so much more manageable. And because of that, we can guide our podcast in the direction that we want. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense at all. I have a bad habit of
values.
Yeah, same values. I have a bad habit of, like, having a lot of thoughts in my head and struggling to get them out of my mouth.
Well, that's a good habit for podcasting.
Yeah, I guess so. better
Keeps it
than
interesting.
an empty head,
Yeah.
right?
Um, who was the first like person that you interviewed that was like kind of a star to you before you, like a
Hmm.
legend before you actually personally talked to him?
Interesting question. So let's see. Our first interview ever was Dan Dennis, and he reached out. He knew Sam through, I believe, a camp or something like that, and Sam had gotten his number, and I don't remember how. Um, but Dan actually had heard about our podcast, and he reached out to us, and he was like, "Do you guys want? I got some news to drop. Would you like me to drop it on your podcast?" And we were like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was cool because we were like, it's our first interview. It's exciting, right? You and I had talked about like dealing with nerves and stuff before an interview. And I
Because
remember,
man, you talk to these like guys that you see on Flow all the time, and
yeah,
it's like I'm talking to this person. It's pretty cool.
dude, it's like nothing else. And I remember, I was like, I got to do so much Dan Dennis research. And so like maybe for 3 or 4 days straight, like I watched his Flow film multiple times. I read up on all the stuff that went down with him and Ramos. I watched
Great
all
Flow
of his
film, by the
matches.
way.
Excellent Flow film. And so going into that interview, I was like super prepared. We made a list of questions and stuff, but even then, like the whole interview only lasted like 20 minutes, like not that long at all. And so that was just a really cool experience. And looking back on it, and I think I listened to the episode like maybe a month ago. It was terrible. It was it was just horrible. It was not interesting. We were not able to like get a conversation going or anything like that. Sam and I were like stuttering on our questions, and we didn't really know how to reveal his personality, because that's our biggest thing with the interviews of Home Advantage is we want to give these guys a platform for their personalities to be known, right? Because when you look on the TV and you're watching, for example, Brock Zackrell, you watch him wrestle, you don't know what kind of person he's like off the mat,
Exactly.
And so the coolest thing for Home Advantage and for me personally is talking to these guys, learning their mentalities, learning their personalities, looking at how they approach life, and getting to know them, and helping other people to listen to it and get an idea for who they are, and hopefully just bring more awareness to the sport and to the guys competing, competing now, competing then, guys on and off the mat. It's pretty interesting, I think. So I would say Dan Dennis was definitely the first interview. It was definitely the first interview, but it was also the first interview that kind of opened my eyes to what makes a good interview. So.
After I did like my first one with like a wrestler that I thought was really cool,
Mm-hmm.
my thoughts after were like, wow, that was the scariest thing I've ever done. Like that must have been terrible. And it wasn't great at all, but it was better than I thought it went in my head.
That's usually how it goes, right?
Yeah, and 3, I was just like, oh, now I can like shower all this sweat off. I'm just over. I got that one out of the way.
Yeah, funny story. During the Dan Dennis interview, I was like bouncing my knee the whole time, and like I'm like hitting the table a little bit, and it's like shaking the mic and stuff. But like so sweaty, so nervous. It's just scary. It's scary.
It really is.
The biggest suggestion I have to anybody starting a podcast or anything like that is just roll with it. Recognize that you are certainly going to make bad content, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're going to make stuff that is so like terrible. You can't listen to it. You sound like an idiot. You say the wrong things. Like so much stuff is going to happen that you can't control, because we're all humans, right? At the end of the day, we all make mistakes, and there's nothing that we can do about it. I'm not perfect, and I'll be the first person to admit it. Since I recognize that, since I take that in stride with who I am and who I want to be and recognizing that I'm going to make mistakes, it allows me, not only on the podcasting side, but in life in general, to roll with the mistakes and make the best of them. And, you know, sometimes I do terrible podcasts. Sometimes I make horrible takes. I completely blew it on our last recording a couple days back, where I was like, I just asked this dumb question. I was like, are Jason Ness and Dylan Ness, like, are they related or anything like that? And they're like, well, are you joking? And I was like, no, are they related? And they're like, Jude, they're brothers. And I was like, oh my gosh. That was up there with the dumbest things I've ever said ever. But like,
wait, who was on that call?
So it was me and Sam and Jacob and Brayton Lee of Minnesota. And oh my gosh, I sounded like such an idiot. It was terrible. Dude, we've all done it. And because of that, you know, you just learn to deal with it. And so my biggest suggestion to anyone who wants to start a podcast or even start, you know, creating content of any form, just recognize it's going to suck at first. It might even suck when you're 100 episodes into it, right?
Yeah.
It's a process. You get better. You grow, and you have to make mistakes to grow. But like looking back on our old podcast, just knowing like how terrible we were, how many like dumb mistakes we've made. Like there was a time I just deleted the whole episode on accident, like the whole thing. It's gone. You can't find it. Don't try to look for it.
Which one was it?
I believe it's 17. Yeah, Home Ed Advantage, our 17th ever episode. It's gone. You can't find it. And so, you know, you just gotta roll with it, right? And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Grow. Like, try not to make mistakes, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. Another big thing is like, do what you can to make a good product, but don't over stress it. I would say is the big thing for me. I know that, like, you know, at first I thought that we talked too slowly in our podcasts. And so what I did is I downloaded this, like this audio editing thing, and I took the file, converted it to an MP3, put it in the thing, sped it up by like 6 or 7%. And so it's like barely imperceptible, but like, you know, because I was just insecure of how slow we were talking. Don't be concerned with that. Whoever needs to hear this, don't be concerned with making it as good of a product like that you're putting so much time into it. Do your best, get it out there, don't break your back over it, and, you know, try to make a better one next time. So, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you do, you know, you should always be trying to improve at least. So when you look back at, like, your old work, it's just always going to be tough to look at or listen to.
Mm-hmm. No, it's some of that stuff's just awful. And the funny thing is like people are like, oh, Home Ed Advantage, I'm gonna go listen to the first episode so I can get all caught up. And like our first episode has like maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 listens or whatever, and then like it just kind of drops off after that because people are like, oh, it's not very good. And I'm like, wait, no, don't listen to that because that stuff's the worst, right? It's kind of funny how that happens. Some of our interviews that I think are the best actually have some of the least listens. And whatever, right? It's always going to be on the internet. Once it's there, someone can find this in 15 years and they can listen to this. And if they can take one little thing from it, then what I've done is a success. So, cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, I know you obviously watch FRL a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy tuning in.
It's fun.
But like, if you've ever listened to like their first couple episodes, it's just like crazy how much it's changed.
Right.
Like, same for any podcast, really.
100%.
But yeah. Well, I guess we're kind of wrapping up here. But are there any specific episodes that someone should go check out that you think would be good to get started on the HMA life?
So I always tend to love our interviews the most. I think that, you know, while Sam and I are kids and while we have our own perspectives, we still, you know, I'll admit, sometimes we're not interesting to listen to. Sometimes it's like, all right, these kids don't know what they're talking about. So I like to go and re-listen to the interviews. But a good one is, I know for mine, I like the Brock Zackarel one I did. I just posted one with Nazar Kolchisky, who, he's from the Ukraine. He has this crazy story of how he even got to America. He wrestled D3 for Wisconsin Oshkosh, and is now looking to make an Olympic run. And nobody really knows who he is. And so it's a very interesting story to release.
By the way, I listened to most of that one. Nazar, when I was in high school, he actually came to my high school and helped out at a practice once.
No way.
And because my high school coach that year used to be the head coach at Oshkosh, so we worked with him. But he's the nicest guy ever.
So awesome. He's so nice.
Super cool. Super chill.
Mm-hmm. And
check out his Instagram, by the way.
Yeah, he does some insane, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And so this goes back to just meeting people, personalities, and seeing who they are, as a human being. It's really, really interesting. I would say one interview everyone has to listen to is Sam Herring's one with Jordan Burroughs, which is so, so well done. Sam kills it. He's a savant, right? He's one of the most talented people I've ever met, especially at his age. He really just puts me in awe daily of just this kid's intelligent. And he's 13. And man, just to hold his own in debates and lead Olympians and world champions on these excellent interviews it's really admirable. So I would suggest Nazar Kolchisky, Brock Zackarel, and Jordan Burroughs definitely listen to. Also, while I'm on this on the plugging thing, we're doing this all decade best of the decade dual tournament type thing. So we're taking the top 16 teams of the past 10 years of NCAAs and we're putting them up against each other, and they're all decade teams. So we take the best wrestler at each weight for the whole decade. For example, Penn State looks like Nico, RBY, Nick Lee, Jason Nolf, David Taylor, Ed Ruth, all the way through. So interesting stuff to be sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I haven't gotten around to watching that just because the length of it intimidated me, but I'm definitely looking forward to jumping into it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with podcasting in general.
Did a lot of research for it and put a lot of work into it, though, so I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
It's been a really fun project to do, especially for me, who I only came aware of the collegiate wrestling probably in 2014 at the latest. So any of those guys before 2014, I have no clue. So it's good for me just personally to look back through the brackets, to watch old matches, to learn who these guys were. So hopefully I can become a better wrestler and a more intelligent podcaster on the side. So
how cool would that be if there was a history book of just wrestling stuff?
Dude, like an encyclopedia? Maybe we should.
That would be awesome. I would buy it. Take it.
Oh man, be special stuff.
Or just a documentary or a podcast, just the history of wrestling. That would be awesome.
But the thing with the history of wrestling, it's just there's so much. There's so much.
Start with the Olympics.
Start with the Olympics and move all the way through. That'd be a cool project. I know that Sam actually wants to get into documentaries. I think little stuff like that, I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Ryan Warner does? Or
yes,
this video.
I think
start with audio.
I think start with audio, but I don't know Sam's plan.
Itself, so.
You're telling me, man. Just scheduling between practices and podcasts and getting my schoolwork done. Scheduling's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because it just takes up a lot of my time. But it's time well spent. I'm gonna be completely honest. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing than just talking about wrestling with some awesome people. It's fun stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I do have to get back to studying for finals. This is my last week of college ever, so I'm pretty pumped about
Congratulations, bud.
that. Thank you.
Man, it's been a long journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, but yeah. So I guess where can people find you on social media?
All right. Well, me personally, you can follow me at Jude Swisher on Twitter, at Jude.Swisher on Instagram. And then Home Mat Advantage, we are on, we have our website, www.hmawrestling.com. You can go listen to our podcasts, which is we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Podbean, like you name it, man. We're also on YouTube. Basically, if you type in Home Mat Advantage into Google, you'll find us. We're all, I think we're HMA Wrestling on Instagram and Twitter too. So, we're everywhere, and that's what we pride ourselves on doing. We want to create accessible content that people can, consume. So
Awesome.
No problem, my man.
Check them out, guys. Yeah. Let me know if you guys ever want to do any podcasts or anything together.
Yeah.
Other than that, I appreciate you hopping on the call, Jude. It's been a lot of fun.
It's my pleasure, and I'm super super honored to be one of the first podcasts on the Defensive Pin podcast, which has a huge future in front of us. So, it's gonna be cool when you look back on this in whatever a year or more. You're gonna be like, Jude Swisher, look, I had him on. So that's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure, man.
Awesome. Glad I could have you on. Take it easy, man.
I will. You too.